Hello and welcome to American Riviera Bank's Regional Pulse. This is Laurel Sykes, Chief Risk Officer for the bank. Today my guest is Rick Boller from the Santa Barbara Bowl, one of the premier outdoor concert venues in the country. Rick has been the executive director of the Bowl for over 10 years, but has been with the Bowl in a variety of capacities for over 20. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
So, Rick, how about you give us a little bit of historical perspective on the Santa Barbara Bowl? How has it grown over the years that you've been here?
For sure. So the bowl was built in 1936. We were built as a WPA project, originally for approximately $100,000. If you're familiar with WPA projects, it was an environment where construction projects were created to put money back into the economy and create jobs. So many really impressive venues, one of which being ours, was constructed during that time.
So in terms of the history of the Bowl here, how have you watched it grow over the last few years?
So the Bowl in the early 90s, when the Santa Barbara Bowl Foundation took over from the County of Santa Barbara, was in total disrepair after a number of years of being inactive and operating in a capacity that maybe it wasn't originally intended to operate as. The facility needed to be renovated. Over the course of a number of years, between 1995 and 2014, the Bowl Foundation raised approximately $40 million.
Wow.
Yeah, that $40 million went into the renovation and restoration of the facility and brought us to the place that we are today.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I remember coming to the Bowl long before the remodel project. In fact, I still struggle not calling it the County Bowl.
The County Bowl. A lot of folks still call it the County Bowl.
Yeah. I came here for many years to concerts, and I'm looking forward to doing that again.
For sure.
So in terms of the concert venue, what sort of shows are you anticipating seeing over this season?
This season looks a lot different, not necessarily in the entertainment diversity and the presentations, but just in the schedule more than anything. We are getting started late just based on everything we've been up against in the last year and a half. So we'll have probably about 20 to 22 performances between now and the first week in November.
Wow.
Those will begin August 21st. Over the course of about 75 days, you'll see a variety of performances that range from comedy to our annual mariachi festival, artists like John Legend and Fish and Gary Clark Jr., just to name a few.
That's great. That's great. So talk to me a little bit about how the calendar usually goes for events for a non-COVID year.
Yeah. Traditionally, pre-pandemic, we would open right around the first week in April, and we'd stay open until about November 1st. An average of 35 performances would come through the facility, and right around 150,000 patrons in any given year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. How many did the facility used to be able to hold before the remodel?
Gosh, well, so our capacity is basically unchanged, just a few probably different in the seat renovations and configurations and upgrades. But in those early years, we were doing a lot less performances. We might be doing 12 to 15 performances and maybe only 40,000 people at that time. So the interest has grown. The ability to accommodate larger scale artists has grown from a production standpoint. And people are enjoying coming out to see live shows for sure.
That's great. That's great. So demand is high?
Demand for this year in particular, we had been having a lot of interest and success in 2019. Live music was getting to a peak, really. I mean, that was a way that artists were making their money mostly. And then now, coming out of the pandemic and people starting to be able to go to live shows again, folks are very interested in seeing events.
I bet. I know I am.
Yeah, for sure.
And I understand that there's a couple of these shows that actually had to be canceled last year and rescheduled because of the event. How did that impact you?
So when we started the pandemic, when things first came along and we were having to cancel shows, a lot of artists were trying to figure out what they were going to do with their tours. And at first, a lot of artists made decisions to put them off, reschedule them for a few months down the line, and then reschedule them again. And in certain cases, like John Legend is one that stands out. He was scheduled for September of 2020, and then now has been moved to September of 2021.
That's great. That's great. So talk to me a little bit about how the COVID-19 pandemic has also impacted the Bowl beyond just the inability to have shows.
Yeah, the Santa Barbara Bowl Foundation is a nonprofit, a 501c3. So in addition to operating the facility and presenting performances here, we also have a whole foundation aspect to what we do. Our mission is focused around presenting diverse performances, renovating and keeping the facility as premier as possible, keeping it one of the leading venues out there in the industry, and then supporting youth performing arts. And that's a really big component of what we do. So during this last year, we've been closed and hadn't done any performances since October of 2019, wow. Believe it or not, wow. At the end of our last season. So we shifted and really made a commitment to continue focusing on supporting youth performing arts in the community. We also took advantage of the time frame that we had without any performances and started a major renovation project that involved some retaining walls to secure a hillside that we had that slid. As well as a storage enclosure, and then built the first two phases of a major 3-phase solar project that we're excited to have completed. It'll be completed in full at the end of our next off season. So between now and 2022, April of 2022, we expect that to be done too.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I can imagine that that's going to have a big impact because of all the lights and the sound and the electrical. So how does that solar project how are you anticipating that it's going to help?
With the solar project, we were very fortunate to have it funded by the Elaine Stepanek Foundation in full. And so all 3 phases have been paid for at this point. And the first 2 phases included an installation on our Scranton Overlook building, which is up above at the Bowl on the Overlook, and also on our Spotlight platform. This third major phase will take place and be behind the stage on the hillside, where it won't be terribly visible, but it'll be really effective. So what we hope when all this is done is that we will be able to produce an amount of energy that's similar to that we consume here at the Bowl. So not only on our show nights, which are they can use a lot of energy, but on a day-to-day level, we have quite a bit of energy between all of our buildings that gets consumed.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's really exciting. Yeah. That's going to be fun to see. And it's always nice when we have sustainability. Absolutely.
That's a huge component to what we do. The greening of the facility. We have a variety of things that we do to reduce our footprint, whether it be the trash sorting that takes place each and every event, our reusable pint cups that we implemented a few years ago within the concert industry was something that we were really excited to introduce into the community. Things like weed abatement with sheep and things like that. Yeah, so we've really paid a lot of attention to our greening initiatives too.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. And they make lemonade out of lemons, right?
During that downtime, for sure. Yeah, we believe it or not, we were going to begin this construction project during the season and pause and start again in between performances, and this provided a way for us to get it done sooner and save some money on the cost.
That's great. Yeah. I know a lot of nonprofits in the community have been struggling because they haven't been able to put on their fundraising events, and maybe fundraising is off. How has the pandemic affected the foundation, the ability to get volunteers to continue to raise money for projects?
So we as an organization traditionally fundraised for our initiatives. So the facility upgrades, the outreach, the support of youth performing arts, and the money that was produced from events would go into paying for the overhead of running the facility, salaries, utilities, insurance, that sort of thing. For the first time, we were put in a position where we had to begin fundraising for operating expenses. So that was a new situation for us, and we're very grateful to the community for their support and giving in such a strong way that helped us get through this last year. We did have reserves that we were relying on, in case of a rainy day situation, and had to tap into those. So at this point, we are now looking to replenish those reserves.
That's great. And at the end of the podcast, we will give people some information about how they can support the bowl and its initiative. Speaking of initiatives, talk to me a little bit about how you think the supporting the youth performing arts is going to be impacted, or has already been impacted in light of COVID and the schools, being Zoom and all of that.
Yeah, it was. When we completed our master plan in 2014, we had spent a lot of time focusing energy on renovating and restoring the facility. We had developed our youth outreach program, always with the intention to then focus on that and give back to the community once we completed those major capital projects. So when it came time to step up during the pandemic, we really made an effort and a commitment to continue our grant programs. And we saw a need in the community and gave back through that. We did actually throughout the pandemic continue those programs, and didn't other than having to adjust budgets for less performances and reallocate funds between the programs. We didn't pause on those.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So, how do you foresee the performing arts for the youth coming out of this? What do you think is going to be the next thing to think about with our youth?
Gosh, I mean, whether it be youth performing arts or venues or all of the above, there's a variety of experiences that our people are having out there. I mean, a lot of folks had to refocus and take their programs online, and did thrive in some cases, but then there are others that unfortunately didn't survive, and so I think that remains to be seen as to where it will be once all this is in the rearview mirror for us. But it's unfortunate that anybody had to suffer, in that way.
Yeah, I know my daughter was at La Colina this last year. And playing in the band.
Yes.
So it was really interesting seeing how they came together and created, the ability to do their performances from their bedrooms.
Yeah.
And figuring things out, like when you're playing a trumpet next to somebody else's instrument, trying to sync them up was really amazing to watch. I think the program they used was something called Jamulus.
Yep, I think that I've heard that, and the sheer amount of creativity that so many organizations have implemented has been out of this world, and we've seen some really, really cool ideas, and for a lot of kids, a lot of youth out there, it may have been a really saving thing for them, as they were staying home and they were able to still continue with their whether it be their instruments or theater or whatever it was their interest was. I know
when we were finally back in school in this last quarter, it was so great to drive up every day and see her band students sitting out in chairs on the lawn, so that they could actually be together in person.
Emotional, right? I mean, it was emotional for a lot of folks, and just having that contact after being separate for a long time.
What do you think the impact has been on the performers, on the artists? I know this had to have been probably hardest on, live music, live theater, because of the indoor implications. Obviously, we're outdoor here.
You're right.
But any good stories to share about?
Well, gosh, I mean, when the pandemic first started to come on, when we first started talking about COVID in March of 2020, there was a real thought that this wasn't going to last very long, and that's not just in our industry. That was with everybody, and so we were talking about it, and we were planning for 2 weeks down the road or a month down the road, and then it became 2 months down the road and 3 months down the road. There was a lot of speculation around when can we get back to business. It soon became pretty clear that there wasn't going to be a concert season for the Santa Barbara Bowl in 2020. And I think the artists, at least the artists that are touring at the level of the size venue that we are, went through that same sort of experience. They rescheduled those dates like we talked about previously. But they did want to get out and work. I mean, they wanted to get out and work not only to, share their product, but they also they also have bills to pay, just like everybody else, right? And staff and all the rest of it. So, I mean, I think everybody took a hit across the board, whether it be the artists or the agents and managers and the venues. We all saw that, and so as a result, now that we're into 2021 and shows are beginning to start to happen, there's definitely a pent-up interest in getting back out there on the road. So not only are we going to see a busy fall, but I anticipate 2022 is going to be really, really busy. I mean, because those artists that weren't able to commit to a fall play date are already now holding dates for 2022.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you see more interest in this particular venue because it is outdoors from the artists themselves?
I mean, we sure have that going for us, by all means. The size that we are, just under 5,000, the outdoor aspect of it, there are a lot of benefits to that, for sure.
That's great. So when it comes to showtime, are you going to have to do anything different with your guests? Are you checking vaccinations? How does that all work for?
That's a really good question. We spent a lot of time,
I bet,
wondering and not just wondering, researching, planning, speculating. What are we going to be facing when we get back to business? That all evolved with the announcements that the state made on June 15th. And specific to live performances and gatherings, based on our size facility, based on the fact that we're outdoors, masks are not required for vaccinated guests. We will be asking unvaccinated guests to wear masks, and then vaccination cards and negative tests are not going to be required. Not at that level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Employees you will have similar criteria for employees based on all the Cal OSHA guidance, and then of course that's all depending on when that show gets here and if rules and guidance changes between now and then. So
as it has so many times,
it's been pretty consistently. Week to week we follow it daily, frankly. So that's a big part of it.
That's great. That's great. So are things going to be different for venues that are indoors, do you think, for the performing venues?
Sure. I mean, there's a criteria that goes along with indoor venues of certain sizes, what they call a mega event, which I believe is over 10,000. So all of these different steps, there are slightly different requirements for each of those types of venues.
So again, we're fortunate not only to be at this beautiful facility, but to live where we live, where the weather is amazing, and to have our restaurants be able to be outdoors. And we've been really fortunate. Yeah,
there's no shortage of activity, and people are, after staying home for all that time, are interested in getting back in it, as long as it's a safe environment. For sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it sure feels safe out here.
In the
beautiful wilderness up in the hills here. So you anticipate next year's going to be really busy. What sort of calendar of activities do you anticipate? Do you anticipate twice as many shows?
Well, we can do 37 events per year. And we traditionally, for the last 5 or so years, have been right around that mark, very close to it, or met that mark. I don't see that being any different for 2022. We've already had a show go on sale with Lord that went on sale for May of 2022, has already sold out for 2022. I think that's what we're going to be looking at for the next year.
That's great. I'm really excited to see what's coming.
Yeah.
So do you anticipate any sort of economic impacts as a result of this kind of lost 18 months on your facility or the performing arts in general?
I think everybody has suffered from it, and again, it varies case by case, and sadly, some of those smaller venues or organizations that weren't able to sustain are having to go out of business. In the case of the Santa Barbara Bowl Foundation, we did spend time planning and building up those reserves. It will take us a while to build those reserves back up, but we needed to rely on that during that time. So it allowed us to retain our full-time staff, which was important to our board of directors and our organization, so that when we did reopen, which is now, we would have that team in place, and we weren't looking elsewhere to replace all those individuals. yeah, it'll be a little bit of a slow recovery, but again, through the generosity of the donors in the community, we're so fortunate. We're so grateful being able to still be here.
That's great. That's fantastic. In terms of kind of the broader perspective, do you foresee that the COVID-19 pandemic is going to change anything about the live music industry, or has it changed already?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think just the arts in general, whether it be theater or live music, that sort of thing. It's just an awareness of attending events and what's required. I think a lot of venues have stepped up their best practices, whether it be from a sanitizing standpoint or a process standpoint through their ticketing processes and things like that. I think everybody's looking at all aspects of what we do and just always trying to improve.
Yeah, I mean, I love going to restaurants now because I can look at the menu as long as I want to by just scanning the QR code.
Well, no, I know it's a different mindset, and people's tolerance for it still varies. You know, everybody has a different patience level for being asked to do different things that they're comfortable with. But you know, I see a lot of room for improvements. You know?
Yeah, and you know, in these group settings, you didn't think prior to COVID about how many times you probably come into contact with other people's germs. Sure.
And that's always been a thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've always, you know, if you gather with a number of people, but you know, the idea is to create a safe environment.
Yeah.
And we believe that's what we have here at the Bowl. And that's everybody's goal. Everybody wants to be able to get back in a safe fashion.
And not just the venues themselves, but I think people are smarter now. I know my kids finally know how to wash their hands.
Right. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. Yeah, no question about it. So
that's fantastic. Are there any other stories or anecdotes you want to share about the last 18 months and the impact on the Bowl?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think in some ways it seems like it hasn't been 18 months at all. But then when you really look at the calendar and you look at some of the progress that was made, you know, whether it be through construction projects or supporting the performing arts that we talked about, there has been a lot of success there. It just, the simple fact that we haven't done any performances since 2019, October of 2019, we're ready. We're ready to get back to it and host the community here in our venue.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So one last question here. What are you looking most forward to as things open up in the next month?
Wow. Well, I've thought about this quite a bit in recent months, and so much about what we do is bringing the community together here at the Santa Barbara Bowl. And those first shows and the thought of, you know, not only the team, the volunteers and the staff that put on the events being here, which total upwards of 300 per event, but also the community coming here and again being able to visit in the plaza and see their friends and family and folks that they know in the seats. The moment the lights go down that first night, it's gonna be fantastic. Yeah. So, and then I think it'll just build from there for the rest of the season.
Yeah, not to date myself, but we just bought tickets to go see Oingo Boingo in October.
Oingo Boingo. See, that's great. That's exciting. Yeah.
Oh,
I wish it'd be nice to do them here. They played here a number of times.
Yes.
Yeah, a long time ago.
It's been a long time since
Right.
they have. In fact, they did a last show, so I'm not sure what this one is
Yeah,
all about.
yeah, that's a good question.
But if you could get them here,
then bring them up.
Yeah, there we go. Well, thank you so much for your time today,
Sure.
Rick, and thank you to our listeners who have joined us today. You can learn more about the Santa Barbara Bowl by visiting sbbowl.com. And if you'd like to learn more about American Riviera Bank, visit us on the web at americanriviera.bank. Thanks again for listening.